Hello, everyone. My name is Gabrielle Magnin, and I'm the Resource Inventory Manager from the Community Housing Transformation Center. We are really happy to welcome all of you today to talk about financial resilience, portfolio approach, and growth. And we'll have the insights of the housing provider rooted. So the speaker of the day will be Nick Russell, and the session will be moderated by my colleague Amanda Knight. She's a program manager for Nova Scotia. We are going to start with a few housekeeping items and note that the chat box is already open, so you can add your questions there, and we will take some time to answer them during the presentation. So before we begin, I'm going to say a quick note about interpretation. So I will say this in English and then in French. So today's discussion is recorded and it will be in English with the interpretation into French. So if you want to listen in English, just don't touch anything. But if you want to listen in French, as shown here, you can click on the globe icon for interpretation. Or if you don't have the globe icon, it's the three little dots, the more icon, and select the French channel. Donc la discussion d'aujourd'hui, elle est enregistrée et elle va se dérouler en anglais avec une interprétation simultanée en français. Donc pour écouter en anglais, juste ne touchez à rien, mais si vous voulez écouter en français, donc on a une interprète, pour cela, vous cliquez sur l'icône d'interprétation, ça ressemble à un globe terrestre sur votre barre d'outils Zoom, ou alors c'est l'icône 3+, donc les 3 petits points, et vous sélectionnez le canal en français. Et vous pouvez toujours revenir à l'original si vous le souhaitez. So first, as we gather online from many places across Turtle Island, and we want to acknowledge that we are joining this session from lands that have long been home to indigenous peoples. So we recognize the enduring presence, rights, and stewardships of First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. And we encourage everyone to reflect on and contribute to the indigenous lands from which they are joining today. And there should be a link in the chat if you check it, if you want to learn more about the territory your home or your work is located. This website is called Whose Land, and it is available both in English and in French. And as for me, I acknowledge that I live on the unceded lands and water of Tiohtià:ke, and no treaty or agreement ceded this place, and I recognize it as the traditional and living territory of the Ghanaian-Gahaka. Since I'm living near the Lachine Canal, I learned that it was built to bypass the powerful Lachine Rapids, and this construction altered ancestral ways of life and connections. But before that, this area was fertile land and a gathering place for many First Nations. But then colonial constructions and policy have displaced and harmed indigenous peoples, and these impacts are ongoing. So I'm committing to listening and learning from indigenous voices, leaders, artists, and makers, and to moving forward with humility and respect for the nations to whom they forever belong. If you're not already familiar with us, we are the Community Housing Transformation Center. So the center is a catalyst for the growth and the preservation of community housing in Canada. And you can visit our website to have plenty of information about us. The center provides various services. So we have funding programs. We have a diversity of tools and resources, which brings us to why we are here today for this webinar. Because it is part of the Center Knowledge Sharing Series, which explores proven models and highlights the people who make them possible. Today, it will be Nick Russell. Other knowledge sharing activities or tools include our resource inventory, which is a tool where you can access a list of resources curated by the center team to meet your needs. And you can access both the knowledge sharing webinar series and the inventory through our websites. Once again, you'll have the links in the chat. And I'm going to hand things over to Amanda here to present the speaker of the day and to facilitate the discussion.
Great. Thank you, Gabrielle, and welcome everyone. I am really excited about today's conversation. We're talking about something that comes up constantly in Nova Scotia and across the sector. How do organizations actually grow in a way that's sustainable? What we're seeing is rising costs, increasing complexity, and funding models that just aren't enough on their own anymore. At the same time, there is often this perception that organizations like Rooted just started out big, when in reality, that growth is very intentional and very strategic. So today is really about unpacking that journey, what actually changed, what made it possible, and what others can take from it. This conversation will be fairly casual. Nick and I have known each other for a number of years, and we're going to do our best to stay on track and not go down the rabbit hole. Feel free to put questions in the chat. We'll do our best at the end of each section to get to a couple of those questions, and we do have a Q&A at the end. With that, it is my pleasure to introduce Nick Russell, CEO of Rooted Community Development Partners.
Thank you very much, Amanda. I appreciate the introduction. Thank you, Gabrielle, for the invitation to join. Thank you, everyone, for taking time into your busy day to listen about Rooted's story and see what kind of where we're at with our growth plan. One disclaimer, maybe a few disclaimers. I've never had an interpreter try to work through all my muddling, so I apologize to Danielle profusely already, and hopeful in exchange that she'll vet out any jokes that don't land and don't make it into the French translation. The other disclaimer is this is a very specific point in time, my presentation in Rooted's growth, and I don't want it to be perceived, or certainly not intended to be definitive. Rather, it's a perspective of where we're at right now, and that perspective changes all the time. It's a big reason about why our growth plan has been landing recently. And so I just want to get that out there. And if I certainly open it up, if any of my comments don't necessarily resonate with your experience, or you, if I'm genuinely open to a conversation, please reach out after. We're going to have a Q&A, an informal Q&A as well, which I'm really excited about. I'm also going to be at the CHRA, excuse me, conference with a colleague in April. So if you see me, pull me aside, and if you want to talk deeper about any particular topic, love to do so. I'll jump right into it. Perfect. So Amanda alluded to it a little bit earlier, and the heading here kind of speaks for itself. Rooted was not built in a day. So we're pressed for time here, so I'm not going to do my very best not to dive too deep in it. But like a lot of nonprofits, we were started in the 80s using federal programming. We have an RGI model, had an RGI model, I should say. Reached our high watermark around 1993 of 140 units, single family, duplex, some multi units. And of course, we're in Dartmouth, Nova Scotia, kind of the sister city to Halifax. We had dark years, like many, after funding dried up, which was really tough on Rooted at that time, where we went by Dartmouth Housing, or Dartmouth Nonprofit Housing Society, and we had to sell units. So from our high watermark of 140 units, when I came on as CEO in 2014, we were just finishing the sale of a 12-unit apartment building to keep the lights on effectively. And that shrunk our portfolio down to 107 units. So my mandate and my experience up to that point was in kind of private real estate with no nonprofit experience at all, was to implement change. That was the mandate that the board had given me, and I think why I decided to bring me on. So that change, of course, it takes, say we're at 2014 right now. First few years, we're just trying our very best to kind of keep above water and right the ship. And then many as you would recall, 2017, we had the spark with the National Housing Strategy. And that really, from our perspective, it meant that our board and myself really and our team dug in. And, there was a lot of ambition around opportunities, and we wanted to be there to be able to play our part. So another big milestone here, is I'm not seeing it on the graph, but is in 2021, we had a new provincial government. And I guess in a roundabout way on the graph, there's 2022, it talks about revitalization. That new government was committed to affordable housing, and new programming popped up that wasn't there before. So they acknowledged the value in kind of getting your house in order and picking away at those deferred maintenance, so we would be in a position to grow. So we had for a few years there, really focused on capital repairs expenditures, and then that led us to like, say a period where it was about growth. We felt comfortable and that our risk profile allowed us to really kind of hone in on what growth meant for our organization and how we could play a part in that. And the strategic plan and growth plan are a big part of that. And then that all kind of culminated into a project, our first new development, which was doors were opened up for tenants last year. Very proud of it. Called the Crosswoods project that I've been talked about for at least 8 years, and was able to get it off the ground. And then from there, that kind of spurred into our province actually followed the lead of the BC government and developed an acquisition strategy. And it just, again, this kind of culmination, which we'll dive into a little bit later, really positioned us well to be able to respond to that acquisition program and lean into it to strengthen our growth.
Nick,
Next slide,
can I
please.
just ask you a couple or one question, Nick, with regards to
Oh,
that,
sure.
from the time that you joined, as well as some of those major changes, was your strategic plan constantly evolving? Is it just a static item that was there, or was that, how were you using that?
It was non-existent when I started, and we had made attempts at kind of scaled back priority, board priority list, but a definitive, all-encompassing strategic plan wasn't implemented until it was a 3-year process, and it was launched in January 2024. Now I say it was a long process for us, so we had a lot of the um, understanding and like there was a lot of buy-in on where we were going, so we were able to
Hmm.
jump the gun a little bit. But it was I think the catalyst when the provincial government came on board led to us doing that, finishing that strategic plan and having it there in our back pocket.
Perfect. Thank you.
Core principles. So I'm not going to read from the screen here, but on that first point, something unique with Nova Scotia, or not, I don't know how unique it is, but I know it's different in other jurisdictions, is that it's provincially mandated housing. Our organization, we don't provide wraparound services. We're bricks and mortar with different degrees of affordability. We don't have that mandate of really defined affordability. We do have mixed income. We're all in on mixed income and understanding the benefits of a portfolio-based approach. And with the strat plan, we actually last night we revised our strategic priorities. So quite very excited about that. That the might as well touch on them now. So that we have 3 goals out of the strategic priorities: is be recognized as Nova Scotia's preferred rental housing provider by delivering quality services to well-maintained and competitively priced homes. There's an intentional point there, as we didn't define it as a preferred affordable rental housing. As an objective, we talked about optimizing affordability, but we didn't corner ourselves into that. I'm like saying I'll dive into that a little deeper. We're going to grow we have a stretch goal of have our housing portfolio at 3,000 units by 2035, and a goal of being the largest partner of choice and go-to resource in Nova Scotia's community housing sector. Next slide, please. I believe those strategic priorities that are updated one that were board approved yesterday will be distributed as well. If anyone's
And
interested.
And then with that, with the board approval, how involved is the board with regards to that? I'm sort of making the assumption that we've got a cross section of organizations on the call, some that may be very new to some who may fully understand a fully functioning and engaged board. So can you give a little bit of insight into that?
Our board, when I started, was an operational board, without a doubt. Then we've transitioned to a hybrid, and now we're more on the side of a governance board. So these priorities, I mean, these were rolled out. There was a lot of board engagement on this, and it didn't come overnight. These priorities, it's kind of a culmination of our growth, and then putting a stamp on it in this point in time of where we're at with it. But a lot of the themes in here and the progression around from where we were to where we're now, or it wasn't a one exercise kind of deal with a facilitator that we just hammer out and take these big jumps. It was a
Mhm.
gradual. Um,
Perfect.
identifying your scaling strategy. Um, so we do talk about why we decided to scale. It was an inevitability. Things were being in an environment that's not in growth mode is has a lot of negative impacts on your outcomes, on staffing, just your value proposition are significantly depleted if you're not in a position right now where you feel that you can grow. So I think that recognition, we found ourselves constantly kind of banging our heads against the wall. And I'm talking the earlier days when I started, and it was a pretty intuitive thing that we knew realized things had to change. And not that the necessarily the outcomes of what that change will look like were immediate, but I think there was a willingness from staff, myself, and the board to explore that in a healthy way. Government volatility, I don't need to tell anyone about kind of that. I mean, I don't know how many times I've heard austerity mode past couple months, but it's programming seasonal. And I mean, in a weird kind of way, it was good for me to come on the organization and see something tangible in that sense that we were selling a unit because the programming let us down and we're too dependent on it. So that was kind of in the back of my mind and several board members at the time. It was very real. And that goes in tandem with the financial sustainability requirement and how there needs to be really fundamental structural change to get us to where we need to be, where we can add more impact.
And I think we're seeing that right across the sector now, right? I mean, you're seeing the rising costs and funding uncertainty for sure. So those challenges that you ran into years ago, you're still facing them now, like everyone, but you're sitting in a different position. So if we go back to years ago for a newer, less experienced, less well-funded organization, what are some of the other things you can dive into that possibly people should look at considering when looking at some of those risks?
I mean, I think that it talks about doing an assessment. I think it's that bottom note, and that really is important to do an honest assessment of your organization's capabilities and tolerance for risk. You know, doing a really honest risk profile and figuring out where your organization is in its growth plan and developing a plan that gets you to where you want to be, but also has clearly defined what your kind of your goalposts are to work within that so that you don't kind of find yourself in situations where you're taking exposed to way too much risk and things are jumping into a direction too quickly with strategic input or you're not taking enough risk and you're just fall into the trap of just trying to kind of tread water, knowing that that's programming often kind of puts us into that kind of mindset.
Yeah, absolutely.
Next slide, please. Growth rate. So this is just a great way to kind of illustrate how we've kind of interpreted our growth stages. So I mean, the first one really about just kind of getting your operations or getting your house in order so that you're in good you're well positioned to even expand. I know with our sector, there's such great conviction towards the cause and the mandate. It's sometimes and I'm the first to admit that it's happened to me. You get carried away with kind of concepts or opportunities. But if you don't have the solid foundation there operationally to really define it or to support it, it's at the end of the day, it's going to be a net negative experience. And that comes back to that kind of honest assessment of identifying what your value proposition is, where your gaps are, and working within that and working towards filling those gaps if it impacts your ability to get to where you want to be. Partnerships, it's incredibly important to us. I mean, we look at ourselves at Rooted as a facilitator with public resources and trying to bring different outcomes together. And our job is to kind of package them up and use the things that we're really good at our experience and our operational experience and kind of be able to magnify that out into stronger outputs. So, our stakeholder list is quite elaborate and we put a lot of energy into making sure that we're the preferred partner for all of our stakeholders. and then that kind of funnels down into, accessing new funding. I think and you're starting to see this more with some of the programming, this pre-qualification, it's kind of this vetting to make sure that risk tolerance, risk profile is supportive of taking on more growth that you're seeing from programming. So I think it's a good thing. Um, and but as you do kind of check some of those more of those boxes off or develop partnerships that fill gaps or create capacity internally, opportunities and funding present themselves, right? Like governments wants to support, I'm talking about program managers really want to get in there, and one is I would have to just assume is support what we're doing, and by being able to kind of de-risk projects and kind of clearly define outcomes. I mean, that's only good things are going to come from that. And that kind of funnels. The last thing is around portfolio growth. I appreciate that there's the box about entrepreneurial skill set, because that's something that's kind of often, I'll say often, it's really important in our world, is being able to have an environment where we can really lean into our entrepreneurial skill sets with everyone on the team. And having the sandbox or the guardrails, whether it's through a strategic plan or a growth plan, for then staff to go away and do what they do best, work relationships, find opportunity, create value. But that's a North Star, is that entrepreneurial skill. Anything that's impeding the ability to use that muscle, flex that entrepreneurial skill, is something that we've identified as being a top priority, is removing those kind of barriers.
So can we jump into sort of along that line with the entrepreneurial skills as well as building strategic partnerships? I'm thinking I'm rural. I know you're an HRM. I am not. If I'm a small organization in rural, or again, an organization that's relatively new, what recommendations or thoughts would you have? Like, what would you classify as a strategic partnership?
I mean, it's about figuring out how you or your organization, if you're small, rural, let's say no buildings under your count, but you have a conviction, you add value, oftentimes through holding those key relationship holders in your local community. You understand the dynamic. It's taking stock of where that value is in the grand schemes of things, and finding partners that can fill the gaps that you don't have, but being realistic. If you don't have that experience to fill those gaps, to like that, acknowledging that maybe that's not a good space to play in. And it's just there's a lot of opportunity. I think of new building development in particular. There's just so much exposure to risk, and
Mhm.
there's groups, with the best intentions that really want to get out there that don't have operational experience, let alone development experience. And it's a big undertaking to take. Like, and a lot of risk is attached with that. And it's by partnering and de-risking through kind of collaborations, partnerships, whether it's through private, larger nonprofits, amalgamating, consolidating, those things, all those rocks should be kind of turned over before organization that's struggling in a rural, in my perspective, anyways, kind of goes all
Mhm.
in on trying to take it all on.
Yeah, fair enough. And I guess, again, if you look at the way you structure your board, I've sat on a number of boards. People bring different perspective and different experience. If your goal is to create, build, acquire housing, ideally you should have somebody on your board with a financial background, or somebody with some development experience. Or what other sort of skills and maybe expertise would you recommend people incorporate on their board?
It depends where you are in the risk profile. Like it's a direct reflection of where you are kind of in that growth stage. So
Okay.
for us in particular, it's real estate experience. We're working within an environment fundamentally it's capital intensive, and uh, it's a skill set that's, forget the nonprofit side. It's an established kind of sector, real estate, that you know doesn't isn't particularly different if you're a nonprofit or if you're private,
Hmm.
from a fundamental financial level. So for us, it's about making sure that we have folks on the team, on our board, that really understand that and can digest and evaluate risk relative to kind of the real estate growth that we're on. I mean, if you're starting off, you had touched on the role, maybe someone that's like a great facilitator, understands
Mm.
strategic kind of governance and board governance as a whole, and where they should really add value. Not, there's, I think in many ways it's a lot, the more you can move towards a governance board, operational, like, if you can get to that stage, I think that should be the dream, kind of working towards operational to govern hybrid to governance. So having folks on your board that understand what that trajectory looks like and can work towards that end of it is important.
And that's interesting. So do you typically find that people start with an operational board, move to a hybrid, and because operations, the people who are on the board are also the ones doing the work. If you own a property and you're getting a call, you're also out there doing the work. Is that a fair sort of assessment of it?
That's how I've certainly viewed it. And it's no knock on any operational boards.
Mhm.
I get that very clear. It's out of necessity, right? There's a lack of capacity oftentimes within organizations that are just growing, and it's a lot for if there's one or two staff to take on kind of um, huge skill sets all at once. So, the tendency is for board members to lean in out of the good natured, and that has its place, but it's limiting. They say as you grow and evolve, being able to shift away from that, it kind of almost represents that kind of growth, and it represents the capacity internally. Like, it kind of keeps you honest because you don't kind of rest on the idea that, oh, I can just have board members do A, B, and C, and I can handle D kind of thing. What does it going to take for me to get so that I handle A, B, and C from a staffing level?
Mhm.
Get you in that mindset.
Perfect.
And I was in that position before too. Like, I just, again, I'm not knocking, I don't want that to sound too critical of anyone that's an operational board. I totally understand
It's how they
what that's for.
start, and I think there can be a real benefit to it to the people who are working it because you've seen the work that needs to be done. You have the understanding of it, but that's your goal is not to stay in that position.
Yeah. Next slide, please. Sorry, I'm bad on time here, Amanda. So if you want me
No,
to
we're
kind of
we're
rush on,
good.
we're good. Okay,
Yeah, I
great.
know. I'm kind of surprised myself.
Let's check into Danielle. I apologize. I caught myself a few times ramping up my pace of speed. Um, so the board alignment around growth readiness is it's about preparing the sandbox that meets ambition. So we talked about that a lot. And for us, it was through a strategic plan and defining those priorities. And then that funneled down into something we call it a growth plan, but it's more kind of operationalized, that it's the North Star for our development staff. Um, and it's board approved and board reviewed periodically so that in good faith staff know that they have the sandbox, and the things that they would kind of cover there is, it's most of it's defined around risk and making sure that risk profile fits where the board feels we should be.
So explain what the sandbox is, because you stumped me on this when we talked about this ages ago.
So the tricky part, and I'm sure there's probably some folks on this call can understand, is as an ED CEO, you see the need, you live it, you're full-time employee, and you have ambition and you want to add value and just provide outcomes. So you're bullish and you're all in and you're driving along and you're taking risks, and you're having, as you expose yourself to kind of try to get yourself into opportunities, quick, nimble kind of understanding of opportunities is important, because then you can go and respond like in real time if you're having meetings and suss out opportunities. If you don't have a strategic plan that you can fall back on, it might create a situation where there's misalignment with the board if they feel, listen, maybe my personal risk tolerance, I'm speaking from a board member's perspective, might not align with the direction you're taking, and maybe you're being a little bit too bullish, and then at the board meeting there's friction, and it's just like, not because no one doesn't want anything good to happen to the organization. It just comes out of a clarity and a perspective. So by defining it in a board approved strat plan or growth plan, then it gives everyone, both board members and staff, a really good, clear understanding of, okay, this is my lane. This is how much exposure and I can take onto risk, and I can find opportunities within that. I can do the good work that lean into my entrepreneurial skill set that I have because I know in good faith that I have something that's defined and definitive and board approved. Does
Perfect.
that make sense?
Thank you.
And we talked a little bit about kind of capital strategy and diversified revenue stream, and we don't want to rely only on government funding. And if we have time, maybe at the end, we've taken a kind of a different approach with, I mean, really, we have moved away towards as a baseline, just to de-risk opportunities. And this is on particular on our development side. As a baseline, used conventional kind of real estate pro formas and without government support. And then it's presented, we bring opportunities that we know pencil out without government support and present it to government in a way that's, here's a really exciting opportunity. How would you like to participate? Kind of take control and de-risk the projects that way. I don't know if we'll have time at some point to talk about that. That's been our approach with Build Canada Homes, our applications that have gone in. But that's from a capital strategy that seems to be really resonating and exciting to kind of dive into that a little bit more with Build Canada Homes. The revenue stream, there's this profit for purpose model, and many of you may have heard that expression, and we've really rooted and bought into it. It's part of our mandate. It's ingrained in kind of our strategic plan priorities. And if you have a portfolio, and I'll use an extreme case, but if you have the opportunity to have a building that's a 100-unit building that's at full market, or do you run the risk of not having that building because you're waiting for certain outcomes, certain affordability? Is it better to just to have the building, knowing that we've got a nonprofit advantage, which I'll touch on in one slide, and just have that building knowing real estate's a long game and there's a few other reasons? Or do you forego that because you're kind of dug into your mandate and and maybe you can take those proceeds and take them to another project or distribute the proceeds from a 100% market building and sprinkle it into other opportunities or support growth in other ways and take it off to a different site. So it's a lot of things we wrestle with. It's a very conflicting kind of concept that I've always struggled with, and I know many in these calls have as well, is you're trying to understand real estate. Like real estate is, from a pro forma perspective, is pretty much the same whether you're private or nonprofit. You want to have outcomes, you want to provide affordability, it's baked in your mandate, but at the same time you have obligations to like normal real estate obligations, like pay your mortgage, keep up with deferred maintenance, keep reserves that are relative enough to support any of your growth plans. And those just bang heads like at every turn. And it's something we struggle with, I would say, or I struggle with. But we're shifting, like it's evolving. It seems like every other day my thoughts around it have evolved.
And I think the importance of the strat plan and understanding it's a living document that is constantly evolving. There are a couple of questions I want to just jump into because I think you probably will answer them pretty quick. Blair was asking, how does Rooted recruit board members? Do you have a general qualifications that you're looking for or very specific qualifications?
That's a great question. We do typically starts off our governance committee would do has a skills matrix of all boards, and then they would identify if new skills or how they would prioritize the skills that we require, and then stack that up against what our current skills matrix is. And so that would then present what skills we should really be prioritizing. And then our call for board members emphasizes those skills, whether it's someone with real estate finance experience, lawyer, equity serving groups, those kind of considerations. But it all starts with the skills matrix.
Excellent. And I'll throw one more at you from Eric. Moving in the direction suggested require more funding for staff. For a new organization or cooperative, getting this funding is not easy. Most of the funding that's available is for tasks or projects and not for general operations. Where does a group go for funding for operations?
Great question. Great question. And we very much struggle with it. So I think there's a few different thoughts that I have that jump to mind. First, for us, the opportunity through acquisition and have real-time cash flow injected into your um, your income stream is it's been our priority of our growth plan is around leaning into the acquisition program that we have. It's done us very, very well. We wrestled with the operational thing and still do on the development side. How do you pay for yourself on the front end stuff instead of paying a three times premium to outsource it? And you lose the opportunity to build internal capacity. There's also, we've been working provincially here where a lot of our funding comes from is as we build our relationship and build our track record of being responsible stewards of taxpayer dollars. We've been able to, um, in tandem with government, negotiate in-house services like own force services, fee for service, and we've been able to demonstrate that we're providing a price that's at market or below market. And then the benefits of that are we build capacity, grow the sector internally. So it's a bit of that's a relationship piece, and you would have to, and it's taken time and it requires time, but that's um, how we've been able to also pay for capacity internally is through that kind of those discussions with government about letting us bring it in-house. And once you do that, it's honestly, it's pretty, and I believe there's a slide talking about kind of what the outcomes look are. You track the outcomes and then you demonstrate to government, listen, I just saved you three times on the dollar and we built capacity. And
Yeah.
then, it's then they're looking for you to figure out how they can kind of do own force kind of work.
Yeah. I'm going to do two more. I'm going to go to the gentleman who has his hand up. I'm not even going to attempt at pronouncing your name. So if you'd like to come off mute and ask Nick your question.
All good, Amanda. I'm assuming you're talking about me.
Yes.
Jen Jia here from Local Development Group out of Moncton. So we work with not-for-profit organizations to build affordable housing, in the community. And one of the challenges that we face is the high construction cost, um, and the low rent income because the cap that's being set by funders. So I'm curious to I guess a question to Nick would be like, when one of the ways to like reduce, the amount of debt that an organization takes on is a larger injection of government funds. But have your team explored ways in, developing your projects, to reduce the construction costs? If so, what are the findings that you found, in that approach?
I mean, I'll be candid, construction costs, it's hard to be, we're new to the development game. We're developing a 172 unit right now, and it's it's tough. We're leaning into modern methods of construction. We've gone down the path of mass timber, which does have, we'll see what those savings look like, whether they do or don't. Honestly, those gaps, I mean, that's the challenge, right? Is that suppressed rent roll that so government's saying I'll give you A and you need to give B. But I think the starting place is to really understand if A, the injection of equity or whatever the benefit is that government's going to operate supports B. And if it doesn't, then you need to have a conversation with government and try to find and just explain why this is putting government taxpayer dollars at risk. And sure, this you could have a crazy debt service ratio and maybe get this project off the ground, even though it's like a house of cards. But but there's just a lot of exposure to risk. So just being open and honest around the affordability criteria, or at the very least, give in your contribution agreement, ask government to give you a nimble an out, or if affordability does need to be taken off the table to support kind of keeping up with the obligations as an operator and a builder. But they're tough conversations. Precedents with programming have already been set, and we're in austerity mode. So I don't want it to seem as being an easy thing. But honestly, you just got to control that the rent roll, like is the first place to start, and if the affordability isn't sustainable and it's a challenge because construction costs are bonkers, then it's going to be, I would rather have the discussion on the equity side and figuring out the misalignment with the affordability and the equity, like on the revenue stream, than try to play with the OpEx and the capital side and try to figure out how to be an innovator in a construction market that's, it's very tough to do. There's a lot of variables there and a lot of moving parts, and it's if there's an easy solution, everyone would be doing it, kind of thing. And oh, I know that's a long-winded response, but hopefully it just provides some perspective.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to give you one more question because, again, I think it's going to be quick, and then you've got about 8 minutes.
I'll be quick.
Okay, so the next question is, Nick, I'm curious, it's from Allison, about what tools or processes you use to identify any governance gaps, and was there an intentional board recruitment plan to get the right skills to move towards your strategic and growth plan?
So gaps like the skills matrix led that off. I think having a governance committee that's in tune with the needs of the board and like the fiduciary responsibilities and also the proactive responsibilities, all the benefits that a board can bring really is important. So that's why I said having a board member that understands good governance and having those key people on the board will make an enormous difference. And it's not a staff to board problem. You've got the team on the board and they can work through that internally. I guess the other thing is the intentional. I mean, yes, we when we do recruitments, it's very intentional. It's based on our skills matrix and our gaps, and it's very specific. It's our requirements when we do the call, and it's served us well. It's tough to get certain board members. I mean, we've explored using recruiters as an option.
But I think it comes back to your partnerships too, right? I mean, I know that we've got Charity from Efficiency Nova Scotia. She sits on a number of boards and her expertise is invaluable. And that's just because she's at events talking to people and people are talking to her.
No doubt there's people out there that the tricky part is our sectors. It's a growing sector right now. And there's, those key stakeholders, oftentimes, like you mentioned, Charity, you're on 3 or 4 or 5 boards and there's limits and but it's so important. You need to wait to find the right board member. If you don't get on your call, if you don't get the right member, hit a reset and figure out another strategy to do that call again, because it's just so critical.
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to let you get back to the slides.
Oh, right. I don't even know where. Okay. Sorry. The slide here in particular, growth-oriented mindset, and I had kind of alluded to it earlier, is that I've always really struggled with, and still very much do, is ensuring growth without mission drift. And it's a tough to kind of rationalize in your head, but it's such an important thing to really take the time as an organization, if you're leading your organization, to really think about and process kind of like, the net outcome. So is it better if you had, 100-unit building at full market rent or no building at all? Those kind of tough decisions, right? And just understand how that might fit into your growth plan, because the mission drift, I mean, I think there's a nonprofit advantage. There's fundamentally, as a nonprofit, there's an opportunity to provide outcomes. And I think there's the next slide on that, which I'll get into. So like, are we comfortable with just that competitive nonprofit advantage being enough to kind of support growth, even if government just disappears? It's a big question in organizations. The sooner you can kind of explore that as a group with your board and tease that out and just kind of just make that more real, it's only going to help you in your growth plan, because we do, as a sector, we need to change how things, generally speaking, are being done. And we know that government programming is not, we can't just depend on government programming.
Mm-hmm.
Next slide there. Sorry again, Danielle, talking so fast. So mixed income is a stability engine through our existing portfolios rent geared to income, and we're very aware of the challenges that that brings. So I think through acquisition, because of course you're buying buildings that have tenants, have rent roll, and presumably have some suppressed rents on there. In a roundabout way, and then you get to see through going through the exercise of acquisition the benefits that come along with that real-time cash flow, like your debt servicing ratio. It's a little bit more attractive. It's underwritten, like risk is nice and clean. You've got a kind of an integrated community already. I just think of when you kind of start especially with the rental protection fund gets rolled out federally and everyone has an opportunity across the country to explore the benefits of acquisition. It's for us, it's been a game changer. And I say it's been the driver of our growth. So taking the time as an organization to really understand the benefits that it brings and trying to be open-minded about it, I think is going to be really critical for groups. Our growth it would be significantly stalled if we didn't have the acquisition fund. It would be it's made things significantly better. It's de-risked all of our development projects because of the scale attached with it. So yeah, so I again, I don't really have a full vision on nationally how many organizations are implementing mixed income or not. I might just be talking about something everyone already knows. But if you are thinking that mixed income isn't for you, I would suggest maybe take another look at it because it's done really good things for our organization in particular.
But I think it's interesting because you have, and I mean, I was chatting with somebody else yesterday, like the terms entrepreneurial, asset, growth, profit. None of these are bad words if you manage and maintain and grow and invest them in not for profit or in your community. So having that mixed income and making income is what allows you to provide more deeply affordable units or maybe some different wraparound services or money down to purchase a property. But to your point from the start, your board and your North Star, your strategic plan is what dictates that, correct?
Correct. Yeah. Yeah. It's that acknowledgement, like at the portfolio approach that about the net benefit, the net organization as a whole and growth is key. We talk about it, the CHRE talks about 20% of the sector and not losing sight of that. Would you forego growth because of kind of assumptions around how much affordability you should or shouldn't have on a property? And the place I'm in right now is I would never substitute. I would always lean on the side of growth, adding units versus the present day affordability because I know there's competitive advantages that nonprofits have that will support outcomes immediately in smaller ways, but also long term in bigger ways.
Perfect. Okay, we're down to 10 minutes.
Oh, how many slides do I have? I feel like I've
I think you've got maybe 3.
Okay, I'll go so
Okay,
quick.
yeah.
So we want to be to 3,000 units. This is a stretch goal. This came out of our newly minted strategic update from yesterday. This is the reflection. This is doable based on an acquisition strategy and using leverage, really leaning into the power of leverage from our existing portfolio, primarily the RGI stuff. That's all the mortgages have matured basically. But this is very doable. And this is where, from an operational perspective, we're setting our, because you talk about how to position yourself for policies and operational kind of baseline. Like, do you set yourself up now like a 3,000 unit property management company or a 400 unit company? This will help steer that. This is what we're using to kind of develop out those policies and that for operational framework. Something like this. Next slide, please. I talked a little bit about the nonprofit competitive advantage. So I've already touched on some of the points, but I think if we can lean into, lean into that advantage. I mean, just simply through ownership, we protect against speculation in the market. Real estate's a long game, so we don't have the profit-driven pressures or exit strategy challenges that private sector has. We have tax advantages, often lower cost capital, just to name a few. And if we lean into those advantages and prioritize mitigating kind of the traditional shortfalls that our sector has, like slower decision making and execution, lack of development expertise at scale, limited access to equity capital, lower tolerance, risk tolerance for complex projects, then really I think our sector is unstoppable and government's going to have a really hard time to not participate in our growth. And this slide here talks about a rebalancing of our portfolio, overhousing and over income with our RGI in particular was a real challenge, but through kind of strong policies and strong staff initiatives, we were able to kind of rebalance that and just create stronger outcomes within our portfolio. And that little graph on the left just talks about when we outsource construction management services, we were getting those amount of units done, less units done for more money. But when we brought those services in-house, we were able to get more units done for less money. And this is what we've been communicating to government as a, listen, pay us, we for X amount of fees similar to market rent, you'll have better outcomes, and then that'll allow us to pay for capacity to that earlier question. Next slide, please. Key lessons about the portfolio approach. I think I pretty much talked about everything here, so I don't need to dive into too much thing. I think that might be it.
Is that the last slide?
I hope so. I don't have any more notes.
I've got some questions for you in the chat if it is. Okay.
Yes, sorry, it was the last
That's
slide.
the last.
The rest is a sum up.
Okay, so I'll go to a couple of questions here because we've got 7 minutes. So in the context of nonprofit organizations, which often have limited financial resources, how can they diversify their sources of income and avoid relying solely on public funds?
Short answer that really is focused on acquisition. The rental protection fund comes out. It accelerates capacity, instant cash flow, and that the risk exposure to it is significantly reduced from growth through development, significantly reduced. It happens very quickly. The learning curve isn't as steep, I would say. Well, I know that definitively. You're going to want to have team members and board members that understand acquisition. There is a bit of legwork that needs to go into that, but we know the rental protection fund is coming out federally. So I think in good faith, we can, as the sector, we can really start to prepare for that. And that's the low-hanging fruit in my eyes.
And then not to sound like a skipping record with this, it's going to be having your governance, having your board, having your partnerships, having those things in place to be able to be in a position to access that. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, that goes with any real opportunity is you need to have your ducks in a row to be able to be responsive to near-term opportunity. And say the acquisition fund is the kind of the low-hanging fruit, but other opportunities will present themselves when you have those things that you just mentioned positioned. It's funny, it attracts opportunity and it creates an environment for staff to go and kind of be in a position to have it attract them too. It's only good things.
Yep. So Carolyn's question is, as boards transition from operation to governance, what are the key considerations?
I think having folks on your board that understand that transition so that it's always difficult from a staff's perspective, I've found, to tell a board how to do things. From a governance perspective, it's a real challenge. So I would, if you have those key members on your board that really understand board governance and the value of having strong governance boards, I think that's probably the easiest approach to do that. I mean, there's resources, and I'm sure the Transformation Center has resources on their hub. I don't know if it's called a hub. whatever their website is that
Yep.
has tools that they could share with board members too, if you don't necessarily have those key members around the importance of strong governance.
Absolutely. Thanks for the plug.
Sorry for calling it a hub.
And Blair is saying in New Brunswick, we enter into rent supplement agreements. I'm assuming that's with the government of New Brunswick. We offer RGI units for a 20-year term, and the government covers 70%. Is there a similar program in Nova Scotia? Is that how it works here?
There is a rent supplement program. I think it's portable. It stays with the tenants, my understanding.
Yeah,
So
that's
we would have,
changed.
yeah, there was situations where it was with organizations, and at one point we explored that, but it didn't line up. And then, but my understanding now is they switched them all to portables. So
Yeah,
now we have tenants in our portfolio that have rent supplements, but if they decide to move down the street, then it stays with them.
yeah. And Emily, this is interesting. From an operations and leasing perspective, what challenges have you seen in mixed income tenancies, particularly around tenant compatibility, supporting higher acuity residents, or attracting and retaining market rate tenants?
It's talked about kind of making sure that you're well positioned to take on new opportunities, and taking on market rents is certainly one of those things operationally you need to really think out and flesh out as an organization. It's one of the reasons why we went from Dartmouth Housing to Rooted. It's more encompassing, it's more inclusive. Um, I mean, it's possible. I think it's very doable. You just need to take the time to really process what that looks like. The great thing is there's lots of good examples of um, landlords out there that have really strong operational experience that you can lean into, and use that maybe as a base, and then you can figure out how to make that with your own secret special sauce, make that your own. But there is a good resource there in the sense that you're playing in a different space, but that on the private side, but that you can find out how they set themselves up and position themselves, and then that will allow you then to kind of figure out how you want to get your competitive advantage with them, right? Like we don't do wraparound services. I think there was the high acuity question. We have partnerships with groups that operate within that. I mean, I'll be honest, like the growth is a new thing for us, right? So I haven't experienced a ton of kind of friction around that internally. I might be staff that are listening to this that might be saying he's
Well,
wrong,
but
but
I mean, from the province's perspective here in Nova Scotia, I know they want a mixed income. You don't want to have all, high acuity residents in one building or one area. So it is something mandated, like from Nova Scotia right across the board. It's just a better way to have a mix. We're down to 1 minute. I can't believe that we actually did this. Hey.
crazy.
So I am going to leave the questions. I think, Gabrielle, someone will do a follow-up with the questions. I do want to thank absolutely everyone for joining us today, for the help in the background, for Danielle keeping Nick like really paced well. I love that. You're coming to all of our discussions. Thank you so much, Nick, for being a part of this. And we will be posting this with the recording as well as the slides. And we do have some action items and short and long-term things that you can incorporate that we'll have that posted as well. And thank you very much for the participation.
Yeah, thank you both. And we just posted the message about it if you want to check out the center website to have the recording and the additional resources. And we have a next webinar at the end of April, because it's a monthly series. And thank you so much, Nick and Amanda, for all of this knowledge sharing and insights. And thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Have a good
Thanks.
day.